All right, we're live. We are live. And I'm glad to be alive. I'm glad you're here with me, which means you're also alive. So while we're alive, let's get down to some business and talk through some awesome questions we can explore together. All right, I'm going to read the question that came from Caleb. What would a virtual assistant do in helping keep up with sales or marketing or content creation? I'm going to answer here from some best practices that I've learned about. I have tried some of these and failed epically because of lack of discipline in my own business. I have succeeded with some of these, and some of these, if I had a magic wand to go back and do over again, I would do gladly. All right, the number one area that I can see from a content creation standpoint is this. You're going to have ideas. You should have ideas as far as like the content that you will be exploring now, be exploring in the future. If you're only doing podcasting, you can think through the lens of, hey, what's a good podcast episode? Like for example, for me, one of the things that I have been convinced of is that as dry and as horrible and boring as legalese is, the Oklahoma long form name I'll skip. The Landlord Tenant Act is a fundamental, foundational piece of information for anyone that's going to be investing in real estate. So for my YouTube videos and my podcast geared towards real estate investing, I thought, man, let's dive in. Let's walk through this document. So that was an idea that has some action steps associated with it. And part of what your role may be as a small business or medium-sized business or an entrepreneur is to come up with ideas and then to be the downstream implementation. But between idea or ideation and implementation, there are always jobs to be done. And so one of the things that a virtual assistant can do is they can do some research. They can do some of the legwork associated with doing good content creation. So now, one of the things that I tried early on and through my own failure and discipline did not fan into flame like I could have, and like I wish looking back I would have, is to use a tool like Monday.com, formerly Dapulse. Otherwise, I've tried Asana or Trello. I like Trello the least for this, but on Monday.com or Asana, what you can do is it's a project management system where you have tasks that are part of a project. And within those tasks, you can have exchange of messages and files and checklists, all associated with that task or that project. And so what that does is if you have a situation where you've got multiple people working on the same project, like in the same physical space or 8,000 miles away across, you have the ability to work together on the same task in a very neat, tidy, manageable thing. So one possible implementation of this would be like this. Right down here on this board, there's a list of ideas for my Tenanting Well playlist. It's ultimately going to be a podcast, ultimately going to be a few different things, but it's a series of content about how to be excellent tenants, because at the end of the day, we're always focusing on how to be a landlord, how to be a profitable landlord or a good landlord. But I've never been trained at how to lease well. And without focusing on something, you tend to not develop it. So the idea of tenanting well, it's not uncommon to have 5 ideas, 10 ideas at a time of something that would be a good blog article or a good short YouTube video. But between doing that content or having the idea and doing the contents on the show, we've got to have research done. We've got to have editing done. We've got to have like a cover picture done, and so there's all this work. So anything like that, if you can set it up so that you dream, you have ideas, and then you have a virtual assistant or a physical proximity assistant, parse through that and develop it, then you can have an efficiency so that, and this is the most magical thing that I have denied myself over and over and over again, that I would change if I could go back. When you have this virtual assistant or an assistant in general, what you have is the ability to do your role and then click a button, do other things that are your job, because everything's your job as a small business or a solopreneur or a small entrepreneur. Everything's your job. Unless you hire someone or delegate it or delete it. It's your job. And so with these virtual assistants and physical assistants, you click a button, you go work on your things, and then they're working on these tasks that are valuable to your business. It's an amazing thing. And so you can come back and click 3 blog articles about what to flush down a toilet, or whatever it is. That was one of my attending wells. Like, we're going to talk about what to flush down a toilet because it's something that we see over and over and over again. And even in my house, we have discussions with our kids about what to flush down a toilet. It's a evergreen need that some plumbing companies have put together some good content on. And so if I have my assistant go through and find the 5 best articles on what to flush down a toilet, then my research is a lot lighter because I just cut a major step out of that. And so that's in content creation. Anything in that pipeline that you can have an assistant do is helpful and is light for you. And then the benefit of virtual assistants are twofold. They're usually less costly than the same role here stateside. That's threefold. They're less costly. They're better trained and qualified, and they work on a different time frame, which means that while you sleep, they type. While they sleep, you type. Like that. I don't even know what to call it. That allows you to functionally operate 24 hours a day without literally operating 24 hours a day. And that's draining. Don't do it. You won't survive for long. All right, let's jump into the next parts of that. How can a virtual assistant help with sales or marketing? So same thing, same idea. If you view every sales, relationship as an end-to-end timeline, there are going to be things that you need to do and you have to do. There are going to be things that you do because you've always done them and you can do them well, but you don't necessarily need to do. And then there are things that you absolutely don't need to be doing. And we, I think internally, as we work in the business longer, as we get drained by things in the business and then fueled by things in our businesses, I think we'll become more acutely aware of what those things are. But then having an outlet of an assistant, specifically a virtual assistant that has the benefits we just talked about, gives you the ability to say, you know what, for me, one of the things that eats my time on the property management side is responding to inquiries on the property. So in order to do that, in order to mitigate that, we're going to put these natural pinch points, these natural friction points in the business so that it's not taking human time. But you can only pinch that down so long before you start repelling people from your business, and we don't want to do that. So what's that first point of human contact that we need to have? And then does that have to be me or one of our sales team, or could that be a virtual assistant? And what we found is that it can usually be a virtual assistant far further down that sales pipeline than we had ever imagined. And back to point, 2 of the 3 benefits, often they're dealing with a more competent person at the same or lower price of what we would get here. And that's just a fact of our system at large right now, is that for a competitive price, we get hyper competitive service abroad. So that leads to a higher quality interaction with people when you're having human interaction in your pipeline. So anyway, any way that you can work someone, a virtual assistant or a physical assistant, into your pipeline that's not taking your sales staff or it's not taking someone else's time that could be better used on a different subject, that's an optimization. But then you start talking about scheduling of things. So in property management, again, we need to have regular inspections. We need to have regular servicing for the heating air units. We need to have a lot of things that are regular. And by regular, we simply mean scheduled and communicated. But for a long time, I've thought of regular as something I need to schedule and communicate. Well, but that is a broken thought. I need to separate that. There's absolutely no reason that the owner of a property management company should be scheduling and communicating with tenants about when a service person will be there or when a routine inspection will be done. That is absolutely something that someone else can do and put on my schedule. And so figuring out how to implement those and make it very light so that anything you don't physically have to do, someone else can be doing in the background while you're doing higher value stuff. LenFit Coaching, what's up? Said, how long would it take to train up a virtual assistant to handle sales and marketing stuff for you? It's a great question. So what I've experienced with the virtual assistants that we're working on is you want to start small and light and implosion proof. Like I don't want to hand them too much at first that's beyond their proven capacity. And you have services like Upwork and lots of riffs off of Upwork that are basically virtual assistant brokers that have built-in promises, built-in basically brand standards that you can piggyback off of. What I hear about those is that if you're using a service like an Upwork and you have a virtual assistant that you've worked into the process and they just kind of, do what we know happens abroad and here, by the way, happens here too. People just disappear. It's amazing. And if that happens, then the company like Upwork will come in, replace with a, equal quality assistant. And then you'll have some retraining. But if you do a good job of mechanizing and having systems that you've documented along the way, that retraining can be a short affair. In our sales pipeline, we have probably spent 2 months taking an assistant that we knew from a friend of a friend. Like we got to piggyback on some trust that already existed. And so we got to take that assistant from entering, receipt data and classifying expenses with very little, view into the company. We've got to promote them over and over, like really every 2.5 weeks or so, up to a point where they handle most of our marketing correspondence. Probably within another 2 months, they'll handle all of our advertisements with oversight, with guidance. But really, like that kind of spin up time of 4 months would be something I would consider maybe even slow. But that's really handing them kind of the full reign of our marketing side. And then moving into an oversight mode of, are they doing it well? What are the gaps? How can we train them? But I would only recommend doing that if you know, like, and trust the assistant. But most importantly, if you've documented your processes. So everything you do with them, either have it documented and mechanized before you hand it to them, or document what you do while you're training them. That way, if they disappear or they cycle out, like happens so often with people, you've got kind of a template to say, all right, VA number 2, here's what we expect you to do. And you start from the beginning and wean them off of those things and up to the other stuff. And I think an important thing to realize about virtual assistants is that most of the way that their pay works is they're bidding on a per job basis. So like if you have a virtual assistant, or like my graphic design person, the graphic design person that I've used a lot of times is out of Pakistan, and he does a fantastic job, usually very timely. Like he has stuff to me in about 48 hours to 72 hours usually. But everything he does is on a per job basis. So the transition between a per job kind of virtual assistant to a full-time virtual assistant or a part-time virtual assistant, it requires some maneuvering and really working to understand what they need to be true, because the per job thing is so alluring from a payment standpoint. Because if you promise to do, thinking from a graphic design, I did this, so don't laugh at me, but like if your job was to design this, this letter, it's just like a letter design. If that was your job and you knew that if you, charge $20 for one, but it's like, man, if I took 10 of those, then I make $200. If I took 100, I make $2,000. It's that tendency in a per job bidding structure is going to favor the virtual assistant, not truly, because what we see from every tradesperson in the US is you get the new tool, you go out, you try to book up, everyone under the sun that needs the use of that new tool. And then you're so busy that you can't do the rest of your job. And it ultimately leads to stress and maybe implosion for your business. That same thing happens abroad too, but know that there's going to be a weaning period off of the per job to the slice of employment. And so what we had in Central America is we had some friends that were familiar locally with what a good salary is and what a bad salary is. And we were able to speak in terms of percentage of employment. And I think that that was something that was a happy accident for us that worked out really well, because now as we lay more tasks on our virtual assistant, we're not having to negotiate on a per task basis. We're saying, hey, this is what we feel is a predictable load for a full-time employee. So can you handle this? And if so, this is the payment associated with that. So yeah, and I think that if you're diligent, circling back to Linfit, if you're diligent to document those steps and to scale up what you're asking them to do, instead of, don't just expect them to walk into to a heavy load, but start small and regularly give them more, analyze how they're doing, give them more, analyze how they're doing. If you'll do that, I would say, depending on how complex your marketing and sales platforms are, like 2 months, maybe longer if it's really complex. But if you're simple, if you're mainly email and text based, it could be quite a bit faster than that. All right. Thanks for tuning in. And if this has been valuable for you, subscribe, like, say thanks, whatever. Like, all engagement on YouTube is helpful. And one of the things that really has been a source of passion and excitement for me is, as I've gotten to add value to people over time, which I do because I've been added value to. Like, I have received value from people who are not looking at their own interests, but were looking out for me. It's created an ethos and a desire to do the same for others. And as we sharpen one another, and as we look not to our own interests primarily, but to the interests of others more highly, then miraculously, amazingly, all of our interests are provided for. As opposed to if we go and this is something that I've been convicted of over the last few months, is that it's easy to turn from that mindset to, yeah, but I'm giving a lot, I want to make sure I have what I need. It's like, man, that inversion leads to selfishness, leads to, well, I got to make sure I get mine before you get yours. Man, if we just make sure that we're adding value all along, it all works out. All right, moralism finished. Have a great day.